Recording in 1. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 17. Yeah, I ran out of fingers long ago. Today's topic is suggested by our loyal member, Chris Askew. Punctuation, or to word it in a catchy question, as I try to do every episode, to punctuate or not to punctuate? That is the question. And so today on Mechanics of Poetry, you'll be hearing all sides of that issue. I guarantee it, even from just one person, me. I'm going to start off because I paid thousands of dollars to debate this topic about 10 years ago. Yeah. And I learned a lot, definitely learned a lot. So I thought I'd impart a wee bit of that right now. I guess I should do it visually. This is a video medium. I'll bring up a blank page so I can show people. This should work. There we go. Screen share. Now, I don't know if this will be disconcerting, but it's a blank page.
Oh,
And we're going to find out very quickly if I can manipulate this page.
the white bowl.
A little bit small, huh? There, you can see that?
Yep.
All right, hey, we're in business. Okay. All right, so when I was going for that MFA, I had different mentors with different philosophies, but the mentor I ended up with for my book was and he said, you got to punctuate it. He was very firm about that. Got to be punctuated. Must be punctuated. Must be punctuated. And very, very few of my poems were punctuated. And he fought so hard that I thought, oh, hell, I'm just going to give in, give him what he wants just so I get this damn degree. So I took my poems and I punctuated them. And it made me realize what effect that has on the reader. So I'm just going to demonstrate that real quickly here by my understanding, this whole poetic punctuation thing is that there are two schools of thought. There are the people who are like, who told me to punctuate because it is correct to punctuate. Correct. And then there's the other school that treats punctuation like any other poetic device. If it's useful, you use it, but if it's not, it's not. But you have to figure out why that is the case. So I learned an organic approach initially, and it's kind of like this. If I read this first line and I manipulate this page, are you thrown off so badly by not seeing the question mark that you don't know it's a question? Especially if it's followed by another line. Can I manipulate this page throwing on some lines? It almost sounds rhetorical at that point, doesn't it? Can I manipulate this page throwing on some lines? It speeds right through. The punctuation at this point would have an effect, just like any other poetic device. If you throw in the, oops, that's not a question mark. If you throw in the question mark, it will do what any punctuation would do in a poem, and that is it would slow the reader down to dwell longer on whatever you're looking at. So this is because it's something extra for the eye to see, so it takes longer to see it because there's an additional character. Can I manipulate this page? Then you see the question mark. Versus, can I manipulate this page? It's swifter. So if you're going for flow, punctuation will slow down that flow. And sometimes you want to slow down that flow. You want people to, you want people to dwell on the line. So organically, as a literary device, that's what punctuation can do. Another common form of punctuation is the comma. Can I manipulate this page? That again is a slowdown, right? Can I manipulate this page? Pause, throwing on some lines. And if you had none at all, can I manipulate this page? Throwing on some lines. That's kind of a normal spacing that comes from a line break. Right? You had a stanza break. Start a new stanza here. Easy to create words. You just listen to your own head. It would have a different effect read out loud. Can I manipulate this page? Throwing on some lines. Start a new stanza here. So you hear that the pause between stanza breaks is longer than the pause between line breaks. And if you throw in punctuation, that's one of those incomplete sentences. Even slower. Can I manipulate this page? Throwing on some lines. Start a new stanza here. And of course, you're probably asking this already. Yeah, interior punctuation. Just good. Start a new stanza here. That's one way to do it. Some people, I guess I'm one of them, and Judy might be another one. Punctuation clutters your mind a little bit. When you see ellipsis after the word stanza, it's like clutter. And so one way to get that pausation, bring it down, right?
Yeah, or a dash.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of organically, when you're creating lines, if you're doing it organically, if you're not following a form, then the line itself can dictate its own length, depending on what you want to emphasize. Like if I wanted to emphasize manipulate here, one of the easiest way to do that is to make it the end word. Can I manipulate this page? Right, so you get the slowdown after manipulate simply by having a line break. I'm almost finished with this long lecture, thank goodness. So it's really a case in the 21st century, especially, that we have freedom of thought more than ever, freedom of style, because all the styles have pretty much been done, and it's a case where if you know what you're doing, then you can do it, right? If you have a reasoning behind it. You know, why did I take out that question mark? Because I wanted faster flow. You know, see, if you have a reason, you can do it. And conversely, if you wanted to accurately reflect natural speech, well, maybe that's the wrong term, proper speech, then you would punctuate, and that is also quite popular to not throw off your prose reader. Some take that to an extreme, a marvelous extreme. They write prose poetry. They look like this. One effect of that is the longer the line, the slower the line. The shorter the line, the faster the line. Easily demonstrated. Can I manipulate this page? Throwing on some lines, start a new stanza here. If you listen, goes by faster, doesn't it? Because there's more in a line. But if you break it up, I'm sure I really break it up now. Oops. Can I manipulate this? Got to read it the way it looks. Can I manipulate this page, throwing on some lines, start a new stanza here? So that's essentially what I learned. I saved you $30,000. You can manipulate the way the reader reads your poem, reflecting how you want it to hear out loud. And it can be as short as can be, as long as can be, and everything in between. End of lecture. We now turn to another member of today's episode for her opinions on punctuation. I give you Judy Barrett.
In poetry, I prefer less punctuation and putting it only if it's necessary to the sense of what you're trying to say.
Yeah, that's the big question. How do you know when it's necessary?
Oh, well, I just kind of go by
Yeah.
feel.
You go by instinct. Well, instinct is not a bad thing. Instinct's not a bad thing. It's like you're hearing the voice in your head and you're trying to get it on paper, right?
Yeah, the way I would say
That's
it. I mean, you know, if you've got a line that has a list of things, yes, of course you have to put some commas in, you know.
In between, right? Interior punctuation.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
So
but
that's a different animal. Interior punctuation and exterior punctuation can be treated separately. They can. It's just, it's an artistic choice. If you know what you're doing, do it. Yeah.
you know, and like periods are necessary if you have a line that continues the same sentence. If every line is a separate sentence, I don't think they're necessary, you know.
Right. If you have enjambment and you want people to see certain words emphasized, right, you make sure it's at the end of the line, like the word manipulate was at the end of the line there briefly. That puts a stronger emphasis on that word. Yeah. So it's an artistic choice. Right. So Judy is an organic poet, everybody. That's awesome. I'm a big fan of organic poetry, but I've done both. I've tried both. I try also not to exclude any option. I want to explore every possible option. So I've tried everything just to experience all of it. And speaking of someone who tries everything when it comes to poetry, there's this guy named Chris Askew. He's the one who came up with this question in the first place because it's near and dear to his heart. You must hear what Chris has to say. He is very well versed in punctuation. Go ahead, Chris.
I'll start off by saying I'm in the school too, that you use punctuation when it's necessary, but the subtlety comes in what is it necessary for, which you caught here. And for me, the primary function of punctuation in poetry is shaping the sound, that it's a guide to the reader, to somebody reading the poem, what the rhythms and cadences and breaths and pauses are that the poet felt were important to conveying the sense of the poem. Not necessarily the meaning of the poem, but the feeling of the poem, the experience of the poem. And it's literally, and I could get this from Robert Penske, a poet laureate, who wrote a book about the sound of poetry, that usually the poet wants to encourage the reader to experience the same mouth and throat and chest feel that the poet felt when creating the poem, because that's a substantial part of the poem too, and on another subject entirely. The importance of that to poetry is what separates it from other kinds of writing. And having said that, I also have to say that I understand that there are people who really, really don't care what the reader feels or sees, that their purpose for writing the poetry was to get it out of themselves. And that's what they wanted to do. But
I honestly find it hard to believe that anybody doesn't care what it looks like. I mean,
I've certainly,
that's a pretty careless poet if they don't care what it looks like on the page,
I
honestly.
may, I personally agree with you, but I've had people tell me that.
Yeah. Although now that a couple of people come to mind when you mention that, I look at their poems and they're always going like this. You know, there's the end word sometimes is of or and it's just going like this. And I'm thinking, oh gee, that's how they want us to read it? I don't know. But Chris, boy, I really enjoyed hearing your description of this. You're very eloquent, man. You sure you don't have an MFA? Because you really look like you know your stuff, man.
Then
Really.
a couple of other things, but there are some things I wanted to point out about it though that I don't hear usually in the discussions. We talk about punctuation primarily used as controlling breathing, or controlling the pauses, controlling the length of the pause, and a comma is so much pause, and a semicolon is so much, and a period is so much, and a line break is a little bit more. But I also want to point out that it controls the sound. There's a difference between, let's see, I was looking at Robert Frost. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though.
Can you put it up? Is it
Yeah, I can.
screen share? Because I want people to be able to visualize this. Robert
Yeah.
Frost, very important poet in history, will be an excellent example.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, Robert Frost was of the what's necessary school of poetry, not necessarily what's grammatical. And there's a big difference. But this was an important difference that caught my attention. Notice the semicolon in the second line. Whose woods these are, I think I know, period. This house is in the village, though. You will not see me stopping here to watch the woods fill up with snow. So we have a period, a semicolon, a line break, and a period.
Hey, can I mention something here? Because this is really good stuff. To see it is such a great thing. You can feel when you hear whose woods these are, I think I know. I mean, there's a real substantial pause there thanks to the period. So the period really serves its purpose well. If it didn't have that period, it would go faster. It would lose that speed that Robert wanted. And it's fascinating that in the second line, right, he has that colon. His house is in the village, though. I mean, that is really like you're feeling a setup. Like if to me, it feels like a basketball player is about to shoot the ball. I mean, it's like the ball's set up, ready to shoot. His house is in the village, though. You're anticipating what follows because of the colon.
And notice you left your voice relatively even when you said that. If it were a period, your voice would have gone down. His house is in the village, though. So there's
here flows, right? He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. That is the fastest pause so far.
Right.
No punctuation.
But if he had left the semicolon out, you would just rush right through. You'd assume it's an enjambment kind of experience. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here. But he wants you to pause a little bit.
Yeah, the line break.
He wants you to bring the sound down just a little bit, but not enough, or not as much as the sound would come down if you had a period there. And definitely not as much as if that were the end of the stanza. Side note here, he uses all caps at the beginning of lines. That's another issue entirely. But using of caps is part of the issue of punctuation as well. Because you can use a cap without a period to indicate that there is a pause or a sound break in the middle of a line. for example.
Very, very true. I did my paper for the MFA, I did a paper on capitalization, punctuation, and line breaks and all of that. I did 20 pages on that. So I don't want to bore people with all of that. What you're saying is phenomenal though, because let's see how the rest of the poem follows it. You want to read the rest of the poem?
I have one other point that I want to make. Basically, that what it does for the reader is part of what we do, what we're using punctuation for. And, you know, we're all standing on the shoulders of E. Cummings, and we can do anything we want with punctuation, even things that are counterintuitive, which sometimes help the poem. What we've been talking about basically is, do we use good punctuation or not? And what he started us on was, oh, let's put brackets around the big titles of all our poems. Let's
Cummings.
let's start parentheses and not finish them. Let's put commas and just commas, yeah, in really odd places and see what it does. I'm sorry I don't have a great picture of one of those to show you, but the flip side that we don't often talk about is what punctuation or lack of it does for the poet. One guy I was reading and said, you know, I thought about this for a long time. He said, what separated my poetry was when I realized the difference between the poetry, my expository writing was fixed with poetry. Exploratory writing, I want to convey something to somebody that has a meaning. We're trained from kindergarten that that's what reading is about, is to understand exactly what somebody reads. And he says, the more I left the poetry out, the more heart-centered, musical, and transcendent my poems became. And then Merwin, who I started to read, which is W.S. Merwin, only when he became a poet laureate, he was fixed. He came to a point where he said, punctuation seemed to staple the poem to the page. I didn't want to do that. And he started, and you look at his poetry and it seems to float away from the page. So, like you were saying, Don, if you haven't, you need to explore the options. Can our Yuzo as the poet grounded enough in poetry that it often grounds the thinking and grounds the feeling? It doesn't let the content of your poems float as well. So not only do we need to think about what we're doing for the reader or what we're doing to the reader, as far as that goes, but what we're doing for ourselves. And let me add one other thing, which is probably worth talking about on its own, but that what do I want to say? As I said, we're trained from kindergarten or earlier to read expositorily, to read to get the meaning out of it. And our culture does not train people in how to read poetry these days. So one of the things you're doing with putting punctuation in your poetry is really holding out a hand to the reader and saying, I'm going to help you with this. A reader confronted with too much strangeness can basically, and we've all experienced this, just shut it down. Say, no, I can't figure out what the meaning of this. Doesn't everyone here have the problem of finding someone saying, what do you mean? I don't know what the meaning of this poem is. Meaning may not be the point of the poem. So in that sense, for the poet, reaching a hand out to the reader, giving them some guidance, giving instruction, and keep it from being absolutely strange to them can be a help. And lastly, let me share one short poem of mine, which I think has a rather measured use of punctuation. I do use caps at the beginning of sentences, not the beginnings of lines. I do use periods where I want a firm break, commas where I don't. And that's about it. Balance. We take for granted that when we stand, we stay. The world we know we think is built that way. People are upright, two legs to stand on, tall and straight, eye to eye, toe to toe. Too late we learn that not all people are equally so. For some, the balancer is broken or bent by nature or by intent. They stand for a moment, then tip or topple.
I love this poem. Yeah, it really conveys in its shape the meaning of balance. It's a very balanced poem, the look of it. And then at the very end, you have then tip or topple. And it's like, I'm ready for the whole thing to come crashing down. That's amazing. That's a great way to leave the reader hanging on the precipice. I love it. Yeah, so here your lines reflect the way you'd say them out loud, right? Your pausation was exactly where the line breaks came. And so it's very useful and helpful for the reader to follow that. And maybe some other poet, their voice is different. Maybe their words dance around the page more. That's because that's the personality of that poet. Everyone has their own take on these things. I remember really getting some people in a lather about 20 years ago when I said, I want to punctuate the poems of Pablo Neruda, because he did not punctuate. And I thought to myself at that time, I was thinking, oh, wow. But imagine the effects you could get if he punctuated. And I took his poems, punctuated them, and did a lecture, showing, we didn't have Zoom back then, but I made little booklets and showing them the possibilities of punctuating. But of course, Pablo has long since passed away. So it was all for naught, just a way of exploring to punctuate or not to punctuate. Well, thank you, Chris. I'm going to move on to our next member because we got 6 people now. Yeah. So next up is, by order of appearance, the illustrious man with a new book. Isn't that correct? James Coates. Got a book coming out, right?
Yeah, it probably isn't going to be out until spring, but here it is.
Hey.
Nice.
So I'm excited about it. Yeah, so speaking of the book, when I took the publishing class working on the book.
Hang on one second, I'm sorry. Chris, can you stop the screen share and then we can see everybody? Yeah, thank you, Chris. Okay, go ahead, James. Sorry about that.
No problem. So the director of the program, CLI program, founder, he was a big fan of punctuation and constantly like reminding me and others to punctuate. And I had used some early on in my poetry, but not a whole lot. A lot of the pausing came from either the rhyme scheme where the end of the line rhymed, and then so you move to the next line. So it was kind of like independent thoughts or rhymes. So you knew where to end and kind of take the pause to catch your breath. But in his class, he constantly mentioned to me when I was working on new stuff, in order to punctuate. He constantly reminded me of punctuate as we were going through the content editing. And
did he give a reasoning why you punctuate? Did he say why?
He didn't. Well, to help the reader, to help the reader understand, and the tip he gave me to do that was to record myself reading it and to notice where I'm pausing and then to put the punctuation in the poem so the poem reflects the natural pausing I'm giving as I read it. Because the reader looking at the page isn't going to know what I'm thinking and where I would like to give more emphasis and kind of or stuff to gloss over. And so the punctuations help with that. And so I have worked on that more definitely in this collection. I think the majority of the poems are punctuated. And so you have to, I think look at the visuals of the page when considering punctuation and you know, the form you're using, the device you're using, like enjambment, right? Like you're breaking the line and the punctuation usually comes somewhere in the next line. But the flip side of that is two really talented modern day poets I know have poetry books out, collections, and they're amazing. And they don't punctuate a lot in them. And so one of them is Professor and poet Bridget Bianca, and the other is poet, not professor, Jessica Salgado. And so I found it interesting that they both have so much poems that aren't punctuated, but understand the rules of punctuation and choose to break it. And in fact, they don't even capitalize the lines at all. And so I don't have them on the screen to bring up to share, but they're short poems and I wouldn't mind like reading it for y'all.
Okay.
So this one is from Bridget Bianca's book, Be
You
Trouble.
hold it up? No, I
If
mean the poem.
I think it's going to be backwards if I do, but
No, that's right.
oh.
You get an idea there.
Yeah.
So this
You're
one
right.
is Freedom. Today, I caught myself thinking, Khalif would be a beautiful name for a son. What would my sweet child think if he sought the meaning of his name and found images of a handsome boy tortured and discarded, grown into a man while in a cage, released but never truly free? I would tell him his namesake was a warrior, courageous as they come, and he lost his life in a battle he didn't pick, on a field already slick with blood, a casualty in a war he was never meant to win, but he fought anyway, and we fought for him still. So that poem was pretty sure about Khalif Brower, who was unjustly incarcerated and then as a teen in maximum security prison, and then took his life after he had got out.
You know what's interesting about that? When you read it out loud, you did a great job of capturing those different line links, right? The pausations that were being asked for by having the different line links. It was really well done. And I also found it interesting that you said the poem was written without capitalization, because there's a philosophy behind that as well. You look at the poems of Robert Frost, he's capitalizing every line, right? That's a kind of hubris where you're, you are the poet and this is the word, it's very, got a strong ego to it. Then you have, oh, I'm sorry. I was going to give you all three sides. Let me give you all three sides real quick, because I have a lot to say about this. I really do. Then you have The Balance by a poet you might have heard of named Chris Askew. He's a pretty good poet, I think. And oh man, sorry about that. In The Balance, you look at the poem, and it has normal punctuation, a sentence punctuation, you can call it, but he still makes his line break choices. So you get the pausations from the line breaks, but you also get that orderliness of thought that comes from using sentence punctuation. So for balance, it's really a great balance to have that orderliness lined up with the enjambment. But there's a third school, and I think, is it Bridget? That's the name?
Bridget Bianca, yeah.
Bridget Bianca. I wanted to get the first name right. All right, she is either consciously or unconsciously demonstrating the third school, and that is the school of diminishment, where you use no capitalization at all to show like a wounded person, right? So if you've been incarcerated, that's definitely a major wounding in your life, and you can show that through not capitalizing, right? That the ego. Some people don't even capitalize the eyes, right? They make the little eyes all the way through, right? This is a conscious choice a poet can make to show diminishment, as opposed to hubris or whatever's in between. Yeah. Okay. End of lecture. Sorry, man.
No, it's okay. I used to do most of my poems capital at the beginning of the line, and now I guess my hubris has shrunk. This next poem is from Jessica Salgado. I'll show it to you. And so there's about 3 commas and 2 capital I's at the beginning of the sentence. Title Hair. You'd complain about my hair, how you always found it in your sheets after I'd gone home. I joked back then that I was claiming my territory. I wonder now if anyone had ever found a curl and been too afraid of the truth to ask who it belonged to. Like the day I was cooking dinner and spotted a hair tie that wasn't mine on your kitchen counter. All night, it was the loudest thing in the apartment, a voice I wish I had never heard.
And that felt more narrative, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think the difference with that is I did the pausing there at the end of the line, but I feel like she wanted it probably read more like flow of thought. Whereas whereas with Bridget, like I know how she writes a lot of her poems and her cadence, and so I was able to kind of like reflect that in my reading of her poem.
Some people are more artful when it comes to their lineage than others. Well, I had a train of thought there. I lost that train. I just went by the station. Oh, well. Let me see if I can catch that train. Ooh, that train's gone. That train, we'll just move on. Punctuate or not punctuate, dimension. No, not there. Not on the tracks. Did you want to say anything else about your own philosophy? I know one thing I thought I had that I let go, and that is you could probably do a personality analysis of any poet based on how they punctuate and capitalize their lines, right? You could try to oh, this is a wounded person, or this is a proud person, or things like that. Oh, I remembered one more thing. Very big apology now. I told you before about the people who are artless. That was what I was trying to get, artless with it. You know, they just, it kind of goes down like this, and it's got ofs and uhs, and it's just, it reads like prose that was put into a compact space. Now, I'm not trying to put it down, because all things are possible in poetry, but I just found it intriguing that this poem would read like prose. It reads like prose. It's consciously trying to not have an awareness of line breaks. It is taking that away. And that's just another possibility is all I'm trying to say. There's some famous people who do that. I'm not sure I'm at liberty to mention their names, so I'm not going to slander anyone. Right, but James, if you want to say anything more, go ahead.
Yeah, so a lot of times you see that with like spoken word poets that don't have a lot of page experience. Maybe they put out a book of their spoken word poems, and then
I love the way you put that. They don't have page experience. That's cool. That's cool.
And well, like, yeah.
It's true. It's true. It's true. Some people are more page oriented, right? Because they want to publish a book.
And you so you get your, well, they want to get, yeah, they want to have something like to put out for people to buy. But the poem will read, like you said, just like all the way down, like left justified, and 5-6 pages of it, and it's like, oh my goodness, my eyes, like, please make it look visually poetic as well. Like do something with the language. The I want to share the last one. It's not mine. This is James Baldwin, and so we're taking it back.
This one we can see. There's somebody who dances on the page. Yeah.
So this is Le Sporting Club de Monte Carlo for Lena Horne by James Baldwin. The lady is a tramp, a camp, a lamp. The lady is a sight, a might, a light. The lady devastated, an alley or two, reverberated through the valley, which leads to me and you. The lady is the apple of God's eye. He's cool enough about it, but he tends to strut a little when she passes by. The lady is a wonder, daughter of thunder, smashing cages, legislating rages, with a voice of ages, singing us through. And so
very fascinating, very fascinating. Go ahead and say what you want to say about it, sir, then I'll say something.
Yes, I felt like, Baldwin's using punctuations, but it's limited here. He's also using like interesting, visually interesting, the way he sets it up on the page, this compelling kind of rhyme scheme that's like not like slant, kind of like not really matching up exactly. But like sometimes you need the punctuation in there, even if you don't want a lot. Like there are parts that really kind of require it, like the me and you, to like really understand the sentence. And so I feel like as the person grows more poetically, they can determine which time they want to put the punctuation in or take it out. And we're all like, really playing with language. So the more you understand, the better you can manipulate it. That's it.
All right, I'm going to say something too, because this poem is really great illustration of a lot of ideas. If you go back to the start of the poem.
You hold it up?
Well, can you see the poem? Everybody?
I
See it?
can't.
Okay.
I was
All
just
right, so
if James could hold it up again so I could see the shape.
Oh, sorry, Chris. This one is actually
it's a
share
web
screen.
page.
Yeah, web page.
Yeah, it's a web page. So
Poetry Foundation.
Yeah, we can go to it at our leisure. Okay, check this out. This is intriguing to me. So many things are intriguing to me about this poem. It starts off with a capital letter, the lady is a tramp, a camp, a lamp. Those are continuations, right? So they're not capitalized. New thought in the second stanza. The lady is a sight, a might, a light. But here, it's continuing. The lady devastated. This is not capitalized. This is not a new stanza. It's a continuation. I find it interesting that by not capitalizing the and lady, right, there's that sense of diminishment of being wounded in life. The lady devastated, an alley or two, reverted through the valley. Can you scroll down a bit? Thank you, Sir James. And then, even more fascinating to me, the next stanza starts without a capitalized letter. So is this a continuation? Reverberated through the alley, which leads to me and you, and that is definitely a great example of using punctuation to slow down the reader for emphasis. To me and you is different than saying which leads to me and you, right? That's more unified, this is more separated. The lady is the apple of God's eye. And so I'm getting the impression that by not capitalizing that, there's really one of two purposes. One is to be continuation from the previous thought, which leads to me and you, the lady is the apple of God's eye, or it just diminishment. But then again, punctuation is used with the semicolon, or no, a colon, I'm sorry, to set up, it's setting up what follows, right? The lady is the apple of God's eye. So you're expecting something because of that colon. What follows is a new thought. He's cool enough. It's got the capitalization. He's cool enough about it, but he tends to strut a little when she passes by. So this he is a strong he, right? It's a very egotistical, eubritic he, capitalized he. And we go back down to the next stanza. Why is the lady not capitalized? Right? Why not capital T? The lady is a wonder, daughter of the thunder, smashing cages, legislating rages with the voice of ages, singing us through. And here is the first period of the poem. So in one way, you could say everything you've read up to this point was one sentence. What follows? What is there? There's something more, right?
No,
Or is
that's
that
it.
the end? That's the end.
Mhm.
So that's the end of the poem then. So it's in one sense, it's a one sentence poem. And there is a publication in the world that publishes one sentence poems only. It's failing me what the name of it is now, but if you Googled one sentence poetry, you'd probably find them, and they take one sentence poems only. But I cheated. I had a poem that was several sentences with lots of commas, punctuated, and then just for them, I took it all out. So it would look like one sentence. And some writers, this is definitely not one of them. Some writers will write a whole poem with lots of sentences, and then they end with a period to signal the end of the poem. That one is probably the mark I understand the least of any mark I see a poet ever do, right? They have a poem that's many sentences, and then they have a punctuation at the very end of a period at the end of the poem. To me, that is the most egregious thing. But that's just my own personal opinion, right? If you took out that period at the end, you wouldn't get the stop that he gets, what's singing us through, which is oxymoronic when you think about it, singing us through, but it stops. Singing us through, oof, but there's a big stop. It's a lot of contrasting moods in this poem. And I have a feeling that Lena Horne was a large influence on the sound of this poem.
Hmm.
Yeah, this in some way, this could be sung, it's jazz.
Mhm.
If I could sing, I would demonstrate, but I don't have a day job to quit. So what a poem, what a poem, what an example. There's so much. Some people think poetry is artless. It's not. Even the most artless poet has some art, some artifice going on in the look of the poem. All the possibilities. We're down to our final contributor. I know that Jackie was here, but she was taken away by the time. But there is someone here who is present and is one of the more expressive faces you'll ever see. That's right, there she is, Coco, the expressive one. What do you got to say about this punctuation business, Coco?
You know, I'm kind of in the middle realm. So there are times where when I write, I have to have punctuation, like it's a must that I have punctuation in the poem so that every breath, every pause, the way that it's formatted on the page, that everything, you know, the piece needs to be read in that particular fashion, or it does no justice to the piece. There are other poems that I've written where the lack of punctuation actually gives more depth to the piece so that, you know, it flows in a different manner and that the reader can have that self-interpretation of, you know, when they read with it. Because a lot of what I write is very heavy. So a majority of the time, I have punctuation, but I'm not over the top with it. Whereas some poets we know very well that like everything has to be punctuated, but I'm not one of those.
Yeah, I mean,
Kind of
there's
like in the middle.
nothing wrong with it as long as you have a reason, right?
Right. You know, and I just feel that when I write, it's expressive enough already. So I add the punctuation where it naturally falls as I'm speaking. One of my favorite poets, and probably one of the ones that I mirror the most in terms of how I format my poems, is Edgar Allan Poe. So if you look at, I thought, you know, kind of got how everybody's, the gist of what everybody's doing today. So if you look at this poem here, we're looking at Annabelle Lee, and you'll see that there is punctuation and everything is formatted. You have your M dashes, and every stanza has the same amount of line breaks, and it's kind of in chunks. So you'll see that a lot of the times when I write, I kind of mirror this style, but not to a T. This is one of my favorites, Annabelle Lee. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabelle Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved a love that was more than love. And I and my Annabelle Lee, with a love that winged seraphs of heaven who coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabelle Lee, so that her kingdom, her highborn kingsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sculpture in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason. As all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabelle Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever discover my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabelle Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabelle Lee. And stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabelle Lee. And so, all the night tide, I lay down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in the sculpture there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea.
So many echoes here that have come from this poem. Both Robert Frost and James Baldwin were born out of this poem. That's what's so amazing. You look at this poem, it's got, well, can you scroll up to the start of the poem? Yeah, it's got the indentations that you found in James Baldwin's poems. It's got the punctuation like you found in Robert Frost's poems, but Edgar Allan Poe came first, right? Widely considered the most one of, if not the most eloquent poet in the English language, just a master of vocabulary. And conversely, that indentation, it's a curious thing. If you look at the indentation, it's a continuation always, but it's also a visual effect, right? It's like almost like waves. There's undulation going on here. Remember, she's buried by the sea. So if this poem was static and had a static left margin, you wouldn't get that same wave action that you get. And I like to think Edgar Allan Poe did that on purpose, but I'm sorry to say he was not available for this episode. So we're just going to have to surmise. But I think that's one of the things you can do. So it's yet another artistic decision that a poet can make about the look of the poem to reflect not, you know, the sound and the meaning.
Mm.
Whoa, where'd it go?
Oh, sorry. That was my bad.
Probably for the best we let that go because our episode's starting to run long now.
Yeah.
Did you have any other poems?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I have 2 short ones. I tried to come up with 2 short ones because I know we're towards the end of the session. And then I came on late, so I was trying to be respectful.
And really the only reason is because it takes so long to upload if I go more than 45 minutes. If I do an hour and a half, oh God, I'm here all afternoon just uploading. It's horrible.
Okay, so here is this one that I did, which is called The Boogie Man. And you'll see, like, you know, where the pauses and breaths are, but I also have it, I have it formatted this way for a reason. He's coming for me. I thought I was ready, but I'm not. Not ready to see his face, his real flesh and bone face with eyes like a serpent. Even though I see him every night in my dreams, it's easier to believe it's just a dream. It's just a dream. I can wait, hold myself, attempt to console my soul. It's just a dream. The boogeyman isn't real. Tell myself he isn't real. The devil himself cowers in his presence, for the boogeyman knows its deepest fears and sees its inner thoughts, manipulates his puppet. And he's coming. He's coming for me, vengeful, merciless. I don't stand a chance. He gawks and sneers, petrifies Medusa with his glare. It was a clever trick to lay a path of hope, shine a light in my darkness. He controlled it all, every chess move on board of life. Strategies he knew before I could even flinch, snickering triumph in his words. Your move. How naive to believe I ever stood a chance. He's coming for me, and there isn't a thing I can do to save myself. Pray to my God, arm myself with truth. There is no justice for the damned. He is coming for.
Over the edge, just like Chris Askew. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other one that I have is
Oh, you
again.
put it away so quickly. Oh man.
Okay, all right. I'll pull it back up. Hang on here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you really used the stanza breaks to compartmentalize the ideas. That's another way to manipulate your poem so that people see the chunks, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's dramatic. He's coming for me. I thought I was ready, but I'm not. I'm not ready to see his face, his real flesh and bone face with eyes like a serpent. So Serpent is just so strong there, so strong, because it has that ultimate point of emphasis at the end of the line, end of a stanza. And then at the very end, you break pattern somewhat by having the short line, because that's the ultimate drama. I mean, this is, I think this poem would be welcome in both the page and spoken word worlds because of the content and the look and the drama, like I was saying. And the repetition, the anaphora there, or we're getting back to the previous episode, it's just a dream, it's just a dream.
Mm-hmm.
The devil himself knows his deepest fears and he's coming. I don't stand a chance. It's like another poem. It was a clever trick. He controlled it all. See? That's another technique to create a poem out of a poem, right? You take just the first lines or just the last words. Me, really not. Face, serpent, him, dreams, dream myself, soul. See, that's another poem. 3 poems for the price of 1. And it can be read vertically or horizontally. Oh my God, the possibilities. Okay, I had to do that. Sorry. I'm really into this. I probably pissed off a lot of MFA students in lectures where I would discuss the look of a poem, the possibilities and what effect it has. They probably thought this guy's way too into it, man. He just, and the professor's like, okay, let's move on. You know.
Okay, the last one that it has very minimal.
Before we leave
punctuation.
this, Coco, I wanted to call attention to the fact that your line breaks are what are commonly stanza breaks. You double space your lines within the stanza and then quadruple space your stanza breaks, so that there is definitely changes to the feel. Those lines, well, it's simple to say they don't feel as together when they're in the stanza, but it does affect your reading, as we heard, but it also affects our understanding, as part of what I was saying about floating earlier. Each of those stanzas is given a little float by being separated from each other. They're sort of brought away from the page a little bit, which makes possible the idea, I think, of reading it left to right as well as reading it up down, or try reading it diagonally.
Yeah. Some people need space. Let's analyze this Coco poet some more. You said you had one
And the
more
reason
poem.
why I did the columns and
Yeah.
each block of stanza is there to give that feeling of like imprisonment, but also that space to where there's freedom in it. So you're imprisoned within your own freedom, so you're not really free. So again, I was very intentional with how I set that piece up, so that you can kind of feel that pressure reading the piece off the page.
Cell blocks. Yeah. You said in another poem we want to analyze you more.
Oh yes, okay.
This will be the final analysis of this episode.
This one is super brief, and but you'll see what I did with the format of this one. So this one is very small, and it has a long title, but it leads into the poem, and then you'll see the bolded letters here, and just very minimal punctuation at all. My name is what pulls the trigger on the gun that is held to my head. Crass and careless thoughts puts one in the chamber. Overwhelming grief with crippling torment loads the second round. Ridicule reminisces and reruns of unworthy. One more makes three. Russian roulette game of negative thoughts, another makes four. Insignificant being of pitiful, woe is me, victim tears streaking, and yet this one makes five. Nothing to do now as the last bullet fits into its temporary motel room. Spin, pull, end.
Whoa. Well, this is a great example of the versatility a poet can have, right? They can write one poem in cell blocks and the other one is a whole nother story. Here, I see the lack of punctuation is a way to show damage as well, right? When you would expect it, you can see it in your mind's eye. That one line especially, it says, insignificant being of pitiful woe is me, victim tear streak, and yet this one makes five. And so this one flows faster than punctuation would. If you had the punctuation, it's flowing faster. It's more troubled by its lack of punctuation there. You're displaying that emotion. Yeah, and yet at the end, very controlled. Semicolon, spin, one punctuation mark, pull, different punctuation mark, bigger pause, end. and no period, because that period was wasted away. Yeah. So there's an art, and there's of course something going on the left side of this poem that everyone knows.
Yeah, so my legal name is a PTSD trigger. So I kind of emphasize that in, in the title, and then literally spelled it out on the page.
So in a sense, you're killing Corrine to save Coco.
Exactly.
That's one way to put it. At least on paper, it's a lot safer than doing it in real life. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's and great title. Great title. That can also draw people in, right? Great title. My name is what pulls the trigger on the gun that's held in my head. Who wouldn't want to read that? Well, someone who has PTSD over gun violence. That's who. A trigger warning. They don't call it a trigger warning for nothing. Ugh.
Right. I've actually heard a lot of people that share in who are victims of PTSD and who are dealing with mental unwellness, and that when they read my pieces, they feel better.
Yes, therapeutic to purge this. Really.
Yeah, so that
don't hold it in.
it's cathartic.
And you did another thing that any good poet does. They save their best trick for last. And here it's the temporary motel room. That's brilliant. Fits into its temporary motel room. Wow, wow, wow. Analogy with a capital A. Awesome. All right. Well, okay. So we're really out of time. But I want to thank Chris for coming up with this question most of all. This is a great topic. Thank you, Chris. And Judy, for being a loyal member of our group. We were starting to, the last couple of meetings we had men only. We were starting to worry that this was turning into a men's club. So today we had balance, thank God.
Men with beards.
Yeah, it was the men with beards and glasses club there almost. But then James saved us because he wears contacts. No, I'm just guessing. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But James is always, he's always adding what we miss. That's really the way I look at James. He's a vital part of this. Man, I'm just blabbering on. I should stop the recording. But thank you, Coco, as well, for coming in. We missed you, and you're a vital contributor. On that happy note, I end the recording.